So Mike, how long have you been fishing this area?
So I grew up here. So as a kid, I don't know, 29 years, 30 years. Professionally for the last 11.
You raced out of Palm Island?
Yeah, we run a booking outfitter out of Palm Island Resort, which is a 2-mile beach to bay resort on the barrier island of really what's called Night Island. But it's basically, we are on the northern part of the Charlotte Harbor Aquatic Preserve here, just on the south side of Stump Pass and what is the greater part of Leonard Bay.
But today we went inshore looking for snook and mangrove snappers.
Yep.
A little bit tough conditions after the weather the last few days.
Yeah, it was. You know, our fishery here is based on clean, clear water. And so anytime we get a little bit of wind that kicks up out of the west for a given period of time, you know, it stirs up the silt, especially close to shore. And, you know, we had a good incoming tide this morning and just inshore made the conditions, you know, in and around the pass a little tough. So, you know, our snook fishing didn't go as great as it probably could have, given the time of year. Summertime is a really good time to do just some general catch and release snook fishing. But that being said, you know, we made the best, I think, of the day we had, and I think that's what it is. You know, day in, day out, as a guide, I mean, you have to fish when you're called to book and get booked to fish. You know, you can't pick your days. So it's about, you know, being able to transition from one discipline to the next and, you know, let the fishery talk to you and do the best thing for that day.
Now, you all had a really rough year last year with red tide.
We did. Yeah, it was tough.
And a lot, you mentioned that almost all the inshore, well, I guess all the inshore fishing for game species is catch and release.
Everything.
Probably for a couple years.
Well, they've got it set to be reevaluated by the FWC in May of 2020. But I can just tell you, you know, it's not just my sentiment, but most of the guides here locally that, you know, it's gonna take a couple of years. You know, our red fishery is really, it's, you know, world renowned. And we've been on a pretty steady decline on our redfish stocks for probably the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years. You know, post net ban, you know, growing up here, we really didn't ever fish for redfish as when I was a kid. You know, we always went snook fishing. We always caught our bait, went to shorelines and did the thing. And it wasn't really until, I would say, maybe the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, that we started to see a lot of these fish congregating back on some of our grass flats. You know, where it wasn't just you were catching fish on a shoreline just by circumstance. You started to see some of these fish, you know, acting like redfish again, moving over grass on intermediate tides, you know, moving off edges, sitting in potholes, and, you know, seeing big numbers, groups of, you know, 60 or 80 in the spring, and groups of 150 to 300 fish in the fall, you know, when they're pre-spawn. And so that made, you know, redfish tournaments and all that kind of stuff pretty popular in our area. And they got fished pretty hard for a good number of years. And it was good. I mean, there was springtime, you could almost just, you know, throw a dart at a map and go fish that flat and find the group of them. And we had, you know, a freeze in 2009, 2010 that beat our snook population up pretty good. So they got hit with a moratorium for about 3 seasons, and that put more pressure on the redfish. And so it seemed like every day someone was going out, you know, catching and keeping redfish. And, you know, doing charters, I mean, guilty as charged. I mean, I was part of the problem. You know, there was plenty of days where I would fillet out, you know, 3 or 4 back-to-back, you know, fish 35 trips half day in March, and I cleaned redfish every day.
Yeah.
And, you know, just that compounded over years and years and years of doing it. And the fact that, you know, you couldn't catch and keep a snook, you know, they just got more pressure.
Right.
and we saw this stock steadily decline to where now, I think I told you this morning, I probably have caught my whole season of doing, 120 or so inshore charters, or however many days I fish inshore. I think I've caught 8 this year, and so that's just, that's not what this place is.
Now, after the inshore kill with the red tide last year, did I hear correctly that CCA helped do some restocking? Was that snook or both redfish?
Mode is doing the snook restocking.
Mode, okay.
And CCA, there is and there's actually a guy that's trying to get a restocking program going here in Charlotte County. That just has to do with Charlotte Harbor. There's a GoFundMe page right now that you can find, but it's odd that we have that technology in here, and probably one of the best natural fisheries in the state of Florida. We don't have an aquaculture lab. There's nothing of that sort that's happening here. So yeah, CCA, and they did a release, and all that's fine and dandy, but you have to have an environment that's conducive for those fish to grow up in. So you got to have the habitat, you have to have the food for them to eat, and you got to have good quality water.
Right.
And so
you mentioned there was a lot of grass kill. Now there's this algae. You call it, what do you call it?
We call it snodgrass.
Snodgrass, right.
It's basically, it's like an algae
We experienced a little bit of it. It gets on your hook or your leader, and it's pretty hard to pull off.
Hard to get off, and a lot of those areas which the redfish would naturally forage through, that used to have just lush, beautiful turtle grass, has turned into these flats of just this matted down algae grass. And I think that's a part where a lot of these organizations are missing. Is that the fish have the fish are important, but that habitat, without the ability to feed and live, you can restock as much as you want to restock. These fish have to have somewhere there where they can go. So we have definitely some room to grow, I think, in our own local infrastructure. I think it's you can't look at just what happens with the Lako discharge, or the things that happen agriculture and phosphates. You got to look locally. It has to start locally. Englewood's it's a small little town, but we don't have a sewage treatment facility. There's one in Rotunda, but the town of Englewood, they'll build 1,500 houses this year, and they'll all be on septic tanks. So I mean, I think I sat in front of the commissioners last year at an emergency meeting to establish a state of emergency for our area, and I think regardless of where we were in our red tide, I think what I wanted them to understand is that they have to start making the strides moving forward to start implementing some of these deficiencies we have in our own infrastructure, our own drainage, our own sewage treatments. We've got to start, because there's no less people coming. I mean, they're coming. So if we're still putting houses on septic tanks in another 20 years, I mean, I'm not sure where this is going to go.
I mentioned to you that I interviewed Daniel Andrews with Captains for Clean Water.
Yep.
That program really seems to have taken off like gangbusters in the last year. So much he quit his job as a guide to
it has.
run that full time.
There's a need for that. When you look at politically, what's happening here, I guess in all politics nationwide, not just in the state of Florida, but agriculture, phosphate, those industries, they have lobbyists. There's people out there lobbying politicians day in, day out for, the benefit of those businesses. Who's doing it for the fishermen? Who's doing it for the fish? Who's doing it for the tourism industry? And so, that program that he came up with, in this day and age, someone has to do it.
He said he's got members in all 50 states.
I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to come down and have a sunny vacation and catch fish in the state of Florida?
Clean water.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, this is really, as far as I used to use a catchphrase. It's the best time you can have without a passport. I mean, if you can't come here, and I mean, the Keys is just, you know, growing up as a kid in Florida, the Keys is great, but it's pretty commercialized now. You know, I mean, it's definitely not what I remember when I was young. And so this is kind of like, we're still, you know, Sarasota's getting big, Fort Myers is huge, you know. I mean, we're still kind of the last little, you know, I guess you got Homosassa, Crystal River, Steenahatchee, those places, but we're the last little bit of Florida that I guess you get the best blend of both, like nature and amenities, that hasn't been developed. You know, like just hit with the big, you know, franchises and big box stores, and you know, where everything's just, you know, it's just blown up. You still get that small town feel when you come here.